Okie dokie. Hello, all you lovely people out there. I'm going to go ahead and get this switched over. Welcome to the stream. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. My hand is shaking. I'm so nervous. But I want to make sure you can hear and or see me. And then I'm going to do a couple of tweaks to the webcam, making sure everything looks okay. Give it just a second. Sometimes it takes a while to load in. Here we go. Boop, boop, boop. Ooh, that's fun. All right, just give it a second. It will get better. All right, can you guys hear me okay? So what I did, I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. I have my palette cam hooked up, and for those that might be familiar with the stream, again, sometimes for whatever reason, the palette cam decides to do something kind of funny. So here we go. I'm going to deactivate and activate the palette cam again, and hopefully the face cam will also cooperate. All right. Fingers crossed. For whatever reason, it doesn't like 3 webcams. Shame on this. But at least you can hear me, and that's a good thing. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to take away the palette cam just for a second. Gonna go ahead and deactivate that and see if that makes a difference. All right. But I can see you in chat. Excellent. Am I super quiet? I can also turn up the sound if that's all right. Oh, hey, there's my face. Hello. Hello, lovely people out there. All right. It feels really, I'm so nervous. I know that this is not the first time I've done something on Twitch here, but for whatever reason, I've got super stage fright, and thank you so much to the Reaper team for asking me to come in and teach this class. So here we are. How are you guys doing out there? I'm gonna make sure that I've got chat up, and I'm going to answer as many questions to the best of my ability as possible. Say that again? Oh, sorry, Justin?
You got this.
I've got this. All right. Justin's like Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder. I've got him on Discord over here. So if I crash and burn, he's going to help me out. All right. So let's see if I can get the palette cam activated one more time. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just talk through what I'm painting, and I'll have that on the front for everybody here. All right, fingers crossed. We're going to activate it and cross our fingers. All right. Yes. Picture chat their underwear. There. Yeah, that just to make we'll have a good time. We'll have a good time. Here we go. So I'm going to adjust our camera. Welcome, folks. This is the first class that I'm teaching at ReaperCon Live. Paint with all the colors of the skin. And of course I had to make it some sort of a pun or something a little bit silly. But today we're going to be painting the Frost Giant Queen, and we're going to be using a couple of, I guess, non-traditional skin tones. And let me tell you, I guess, what the class is not. So when you leave the class, you won't be, you know, if you're just starting out, you won't necessarily have blending down, like you know exactly what to do, everything looks great, and you know, that's something that, you know, don't worry about that. We're gonna go over a lot of different types of techniques. Here we go. You can get this a little bit zoomed in here. We're gonna go over some blending, wet blending, mixing paints. In fact, because our palette cam has decided to be a little bit shy, I'm going to move this palette in closer to what we're painting today. All right, let me move this around. Again, we won't have the alerts up. We're going to treat this more of a class rather than our, I guess, it's going to be more educational than entertainment, hopefully, but we're still going to have fun. For those that don't know me, welcome. I'm just your nervous, over-caffeinated Twitch streamer and painter. I've been going to ReaperCon now for, well, ever since 2014, and I haven't missed one since. So I'm glad that we can still do this online. But yes, how are you guys doing? I see chat. I have an example of kind of a Frost Giant Queen that I've painted in the past. And then of course we're going to go step by step and use all of the paints that was in our kit, that were listed in our kit. So we've got brown liner, ruddy leather, oiled leather, golden shadow, and we're going to have golden skin for just a couple of bits, and then of course splintered bone. So hopefully you can see all that just fine. But yeah, I'm stoked. Yes, absolutely. I know there's no need to be nervous. I think everybody's just been so wonderful and patient, and I can't wait to jump in and get to painting with you all. So any questions before we start? Yes, howdy, howdy. I know there's probably something I've forgotten, but we'll come to that when we when we get there. So I want to show you a couple of things that I've painted recently that I've tried to do a bit of a different skin tone on. Of course, we've got the Creepy Tables bust, and I painted her in more of kind of, well, you can see there's lots of golden shadow and more kind of orange undertones. And I did some glazing with some greens and purples in the skin. She's not quite done, but that's something that I had just on my table. I know we've been working recently on, let's see, here's a Reaper Mini. This is for Jacob. And while this mini is pretty light, I think, let me go ahead and turn that down just a bit. There we go. So you can still see that even if we paint lighter skin tones, we can have enough contrast. And I've done a little freehand tattoo here on his shoulder. Let's see what else. Oh, yes. And of course, prior to this class, I wanted to test out some of the paints that we'll be using today. So this is one of the Bones Black minis. And we're going to be using, again, all the paints that you see here is what I used to paint her up. I spent about 30 minutes just doing kind of a quick study on different shapes and volumes and making sure that the paints are going to behave today. Because sometimes they don't. And we like to blame it on our brush. Let's see. Today is going to be a little bit of a blended class. I usually teach a class called Painting Multicultural Skin Tones, and that's at ReaperCon. But today, knowing that we have kind of a limited palette, because when I teach that class, I have like 20 different paints, and we jump in and we use all of them, and you know we've got like a lighter arm and a darker leg, and we do a little bit of a lot, or a lot of a little bit, you know what I mean. And today we're going to be blending that with not only kind of a painting expressions and painting faces class, because usually when I teach that class, it's mostly about skin. And here we're going to at least be able to paint a face as well. So we've got, you know, a little less than 2 hours to get this done, and I think that's going to be a really good time limit. And yes, oh, that's so cool that you're using the genie for this class. Again, if you don't have the giant, this is the particular one that I chose for this class. If you bought the class kit, that's going to be helpful. But you can also follow along with your own miniature and your own paints as you see fit. And at the very least, hopefully you'll get some good painting time in, and hopefully learn a thing or two. All right. Hey, Sidney. Good to see you. All right, so let me make sure that everything looks pretty clear. Boop, boop, boop. Of course, my camera here doing all right. And hopefully my hand will hold steady enough where you can see what we're working on. All right. So this is our bones. I'm going to turn the exposure down. Once it's painted, of course, you can see more of the detail and some highlights in the shadows. And for the most part, we're going to be painting focused mainly on her face and décolletage. I don't know. I don't speak French, but that's a great word. But we're going to be painting kind of her chest, and if we have some time, we're also going to paint her legs. And you can see here how I've highlighted her legs a little bit closer to the front where that garment, that drapery is. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our paint out. That is the most, I guess, everything that I have to say at the beginning, but feel free to ask questions as you go along. And if I get too distracted, I know that Justin's going to make sure that I don't miss anything important. Okay, so here we go. Ba-ba-da-dum. Oh boy. All right, John's here as well. So we're going to take Ruddy Leather, and I'm going to put that on my palette here. Let's see if I can sneak my palette into the, here we go. I'm going to try to sneak that into the into the frame. Here we are. Now the interesting part about the paints that we're using today is I'm going to be using a mix of two of our darkest paints for our base coat. Rarely do I stick with a single color scheme over the years that I've painted. I try to mix and match. And if you guys are familiar with the Golden Skin Triad, it's the Golden Shadow, Golden Skin, and Golden Highlight. But a lot of times I like to mix in another color, whether it's going to be, you know, beyond the highlight or past the shadow. So that's where we're going to add oiled leather and ruddy leather. And there are a lot of different ways that you can render a skin tone. For example, I have yellow undertones in my particular skin tone. And if anybody has ever bought makeup, you know, that's also a thing that you have to consider. Plenty of people have pink undertones. If you remember back in the 80s, they would do draping, where they would, I think our moms probably all did it, but they'd go to like a fancy department store and they'd get this little pamphlet of all the colors that look really good on your skin tones. And they say, you know, these are, you know, what you want to wear. You look really great in like a bright magenta, or you look lovely in kind of a mossy green. So when I think about that, draping back in the 80s, I think that's what it's called. I know there's a French word for it that I can't remember at this given time. But I remember thinking, I should absolutely incorporate that for miniature painting. So what I'm going to do, and I'm a messy mixer, you'll see that I'm using a wet palette, but I guess to break this down a little bit more, I'm going to be using a 50-50 mix of ruddy leather and oiled leather. So if I can show that a little bit better on the palette. Here we go. So here's ruddy leather. Here's oiled leather. Now, rather than using ruddy leather for our base coat, I'm going to use a mix of the two. The reason is I think that ruddy leather, just right out of the bottle, is a little bit too dark for the skin tone that we're going to paint today. So I'm going to take that 50-50 mix right here and mix that up on my palette, and then without adding water to thin it down, because again, I don't prime my bones, I'm going to, moment of truth, paint all over her face and her chest here, and I'm going to adjust my lamp. Now you can be messy at this stage. There's a time and a place to be super accurate, and right now, there we go, I'm just going to paint all of this section here. Now we might have probably 2 coats to make sure that we're covering the bones. Now, I'm also going to be a little bit messy, and you can get some of the paint color on the fabric. That's not a problem. We can always clean that up later. Yes, exactly, Twisted. Yeah, spring, summer, winter, or fall for the colors for those seasons. Yep, I do remember that. So I think jewel tones, I think on my particular skin tone, are supposed to be good colors. I do love teal. That just happens to be my favorite color, so it works out. All right. And can you guys still hear me okay? I'm gonna make sure that we've got our microphone. I have a really loud cackle, so I place my microphone on the other side of my desk because I don't want to blow anybody's eardrums out. Okay. Oh, excellent. And yeah, we have turned off our alerts and all that stuff. So yeah, we are officially streaming on the Reaper Twitch scene on their channel. So all of the commands that you might otherwise be familiar with, for all sakes and purposes, I am on the Reaper channel. I just happen to be using my webcams and backgrounds and all that good stuff. So I hope that helps. Yes, under the chin as well. Now, I like to paint from dark to light, and that's a preference that I have, only because I don't think I do a very good job in shading. I don't get the right amount of contrast that I need on the miniature. And so that's why I prefer to go from dark to light. Now right now, again, it's like a nice milky chocolate, and I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee, so hopefully I can have my, this is my liquid courage, folks. Oh, it's the perfect temperature. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and let that dry. Now, let's see, just for fun, and I'm going to be very optimistic here, and I'm going to say that we're going to have enough time to paint the legs as well. So I'm going to take, again, that 50-50 mix, and just do a base coat. Again, not thinning it down with water. I accidentally added just a little bit of a drop of water. But as we know, bones are hydrophobic. And so if you do mix your paint with water, especially for that first coat, if you haven't primed it, it's going to pull away and it's going to look, well, it's going to look funky. All right. Twisted, I'm actually not. I'm so nervous I didn't drink coffee before this. So again, the nerves help because I want to make sure I do a great job, but we're going to have fun today. Now, I was able to pop into Ian Marcon's class, the blending class that he taught. And I really liked how he showed the different paint colors on his palette. So I'll be doing my best, knowing that I'm a messy paint mixer, to show you exactly what we're mixing and with which colors. Oh, thanks, Ephemera. And because I have plenty of paint on my palette, again, I'm just going to mix that up. Messy mixer. Again, this is the stuff for the people that need to know exactly how much they're mixing. And to prep my bones, oh yeah, see how that pulled away right there? I had only scrubbed around her face and her legs. Now the reason, again, we're using a 50-50 mix of these two paint colors. Whoop. Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to turn that off. I thought I did. But yes, a cup of coffee. And while we wait for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more oiled leather on my palette, because we're going to be using that and mixing that with Golden Shadow. Now, a lot of times I'll take my paints and I'll have a 50-50 mix of the two, and then this and what's going to be Golden Shadow, we'll do a 50-50 mix of that as well. But that's coming up in just a little bit. I don't want the paint to dry on your palette if you do have a well palette, if you're not using a wet palette. So we'll try to, in fact, I've got a little fan because it's been raining here today, and so it's incredibly humid. And so I'm going to park my Mini right in front of a fan and answer any questions here in chat. Oop, and I just put my hand right. Don't do this, folks. Don't do this. Make sure you hold your Mini in a way that doesn't take off all the paint that you just put on. Now we are going to need a second coat to make sure that we cover all of the white that you see on the bones. So once that's dry, let's say it's extra arid and dry where you are right now, go ahead and do your second base coat and make sure that you can't see any of that white peeking through. All right. And again, this is about what we're going to end up with when we're done. So I painted her up pretty quickly. But I have been working on, let's see, what else can I show you while we literally wait for paint to dry. There we go. Been working on a couple of different, more Caucasian skin tones. Let's see, while we do that, I'm going to pull up a reference that I use. Mine's not quite dry yet. But I really like to use references for different skin tones. Here we go. Now I believe how to pronounce her name is, it's either Angelica, but her last name is Das, D-A-S-S. And I'm going to get this image up for you. She did a study years ago that was featured, I believe, in National Geographic. And she talked about how she can take all these portraits of people of all different skin tones and complexions, and she assigned Pantone colors to them, which I thought was really interesting. So here we go. I'm going to bring that up on our screen so you can see all these different colors. And again, we've got a wide range of inspiration to draw from. I know that not too long ago I painted a Mini that was sunburned. So that was a lot of fun. Redstone Highlight was what I used in addition to the Golden Skin Triad. And that was something that was a lot of fun. And then I put some freckles on her shoulder where she would have gotten the most sun. But that's something that I think about when I'm trying to think, well, what skin tone have I not painted recently? All right. Let me go ahead and take that away, but we can always bring it back if we need to. I like to use size 1 and size 0 brushes, Roger. All right, we're almost dry. Again, I know it looks really blotchy right now, but that's okay. That's just the first step. Again, we can clean as we go, and this lovely lady right here, our Frost Giant Queen, she started out just like what you see on the left. Now the leg, again, is mostly dry, but one thing that I caution against is painting before everything is completely dry. So you'll see right here, that little sheen, the paint is still tacky. And if I go and try to paint my second base coat, it's just gonna take away all the paint that I just put down. And then you're gonna have a crater in the paint, and that's just not good. That's not good. Yes, but blue, exactly. Now, does anybody live in a place that's super humid? I don't know, raise your hand in chat. I know I don't use any additives in my paint. It really is just tap water and Reaper paint. All right. She's almost dry, folks. I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna go ahead and paint this leg here again. Again, that's the 50-50 of ruddy leather and oiled leather. And the oiled leather definitely has some orange in it. There we are. I'm not going to worry too much about the fabric around it. Okay. And I like to paint sections of the mini that's going to be difficult to get to later. I think one of the most helpful things I learned, again, I attended many ReaperCons in the past, and I took lots of classes, and I'm very, very grateful for all the instructors that shared their knowledge with me. But one of the things that was the most helpful was, one, being reminded to let it dry. Don't worry about it, just let it dry. And the other one, let's see, well, gosh, there were a lot of things that were really helpful. I forgot what I was going to say. It'll come to me. It was so memorable that I can't remember to share it. Alright, that looks pretty good. Here's my second base coat. I'm going to paint all the way up to her hairline. Don't overwork the paint. That's what I was going to say. And that goes along with, of course, letting it dry. Alright. So that right now is a nice even base coat. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, because I start with darker colors, at the end, again, she's going to be a lot lighter. However, our shadows are going to stay just as dark. Now, we will be going over a couple of wet blending techniques. And again, I made an example here so we could see kind of where it's going. I like that I didn't quite finish her eyes, but she really does look like she's got, I have a great idea. So we'll put her over there along with her blue friend. Okay. And if I can, I'm going to move this fan just a little bit closer. It's pretty quiet. Hopefully you can't hear it. Whoa. There we are. And I'm going to point it towards my miniature, but not towards my palette. Yeah, you need to sculpt a light bulb over her head. I like that. And yes, so it's nice in the summer. So right now I'm located in Wisconsin. I grew up in Texas, not too far away from Reaper headquarters actually. And one of the things that was really fun was I could practice wet blending all day long because it was nice and humid. And in the winters in Wisconsin, it's very, very dry. So that's been really challenging in finding different ways to blend, layering, being faster. KG, the left leg looks to go all the way up to her belt. I haven't painted that far because I don't think I've scrubbed her well enough. There we go. Ah, good. Okay, didn't pull away that time. Excellent. Boop, 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 boop. Now, here's where our fun wet blending technique is going to come in handy. So what I'm going to do next is identify the planes of her face. I'll do a second coat on that in just a bit. So when you think of highlights and where the highlights should go, right here on the forehead is going to catch a lot of the light, down the bridge of her nose, and then of course cheekbones. And I like to put a little bit of a highlight on the chin as well. So again, not only is this painting skin tones, but also painting faces. So it's kind of a hybrid. It's not quite the multicultural skin tones class, but it's kind of the best of both worlds because I also teach a painting eyes class. All right, I'm feeling calmer with coffee. All right, so again, I warn you, we're not going to worry too much about perfect blending, but I would like you to take oiled leather, just right out of the paint pot. No need to mix it with another color. And I'm going to add just a little bit of water to mine, just a tad. And then of course, once I fill up my paintbrush, I drag it on my paper towel that I have here on my left, just to make sure there's not too much. And I'm going to identify the planes of her face that we talked about. So again, down the bridge of her nose, cheekbones, and I'm going to go about halfway down her face. Now you'll see that she has her hair obscuring a little bit of her forehead. So I'm going to paint the forehead right here and then taper it off. There we go. Same thing on this cheekbone. We're not worrying about blending just yet. And then here on the chin. Whoops. Here we are. I'm also going to do just a little bit here on her top lip. I forget what that's called. That thing. But we're going to highlight that. There we go. And I'll go ahead and get her bottom lip too. So you can start to see where we're going to layer up in lighter and lighter colors. Yes! There we go. Noob, Minx, and the Bearded Goblin, they got it. Excellent. Thank you. Any questions so far? I know, I have a very strange way of holding my brush. It's terrible. I've held my writing utensils like this since I learned how to write. It also helps sometimes because if I have the webcam right here, I can kind of hold my hand out of the way and still be able to get to the miniature. It's not for everybody, I'll tell you that. Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely, I can show and say the highlights for the face again, Jamie. So I started with the nose, just right down the center of the nose. And then here on the top of her forehead, the tops of her cheekbones, and her chin, and then lastly, right below her nose, leaving a little bit of a shadow on the underside of her nose, just on the top lip there. And we'll focus on the face first, and then get to some of the other regions. But I like to start with the face on a miniature, and if I can get the face right, then I'm usually pretty positive that the rest of the miniature is going to be a success. Alright, let me know if that helps. Now before I move on, we'll talk a little bit about blending. And I'm going to take, again, a mix of our ruddy leather and our oiled leather, but this time I'm going to have it's going to be 2/3 oiled leather and 1/3 ruddy leather. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. And this mix, I'm just going to take a little bit, nice and thin, on the edges of what we just painted. So remember, we painted about halfway down her face. I'm going to paint right along that transition. I think blending, layering, and feathering, most of that is mixing your paints well, in my opinion. Yep, absolutely. It's what I like about the miniature too. Paint the face right. No worries, Lady Dire Doggo. So the mix is going to be 2/3 oiled leather, 1/3 ruddy leather, where our base coat is 50-50. And the highlights that we just put down were oiled leather. Now we get to go in and in the transitions make them just a little bit smoother. Okay. Now let's say you might have gone a little bit too far with that mix. You can always go right back in with the oiled leather, like that, and kind of do a back and forth if need be. Because remember, we're going to need enough surface area in the highlight that we just painted to be able to put our next highlight. And don't worry if it's not blended to perfection. Blending, that's another class, blending. But we're focusing on where to put the highlights, how to mix the paint, and how to apply it in a manner that doesn't make you want to throw your miniature out the window. Okay. Now this is our fun, whoops, this is the fun part. Oh, thank you so much. Ah, excellent. Golden Shadow is going to be the next one we're going to put on our palette here. And again, our palette cam, apologies, did not want to play ball today. I still have it. It's activated. It just didn't, it's too shy. So I'm just going to show you here on the right side, if that works for you. Now, if everybody's ready for the next step, we're going to move on and create a 50-50 mix of oiled leather and Golden Shadow. I almost had a little bit of Texas come out there. All leather. A mix of all leather and Golden Shadow. So it's interesting. We're going to use Golden Shadow, which is the shadow color of the Golden Skin Triad. We're going to be using that as a highlight for our custom mix that is this medium to dark skin tone. Let's go ahead and mix that up on your palette. Now, some people will say that you shouldn't mix with your painting brush. I do it. Apologies. Okay. Now remember the shapes that we just painted on the face. We're going to paint smaller shapes within that highlight. And let me know if that doesn't make sense. I can absolutely talk you through that again. And at the very least, show you. Whoops, whoa, sorry about that. Oh, what's happening? I hit the wrong button. Hey, we're professional. What do we say at Reaper? Hashtag professionals. All right, that'll work. So you can see my messy room behind me. Don't look. Now here's that new mix. Again, identifying right underneath her eyes, the top of her cheekbone, right here on her forehead. Underneath the other eye. Again, turn your miniature upside down if you need to. Down the top of her nose. The chin. And I'm doing the top of that lip right there. And you can start to see some of the contrast that's coming out. Exactly. Professional. Yes. Well, I'm glad it made you giggle. We have to have some fun, right? And yes, the next color is Golden Shadow on the table. So, our base coat, ruddy leather and oiled leather. And then our first highlight, oiled leather. Our second highlight, a 50-50 mix of oiled leather and Golden Shadow. Where'd she go? Oh, there she is. Now at this point, I'm going to choose to very carefully outline the sides of the nose. Here we go. Boop. And boop. You have to say boop or it doesn't count. Pro tip. Everybody see that all right? And right now, again, we've left the chest as our base coat because I want you to see the difference between where we're going and where we started. Of course, we'll be highlighting this with the same process, but I don't want to try to have to do two planes at once. We're going to focus on the face. And once we get comfortable with the mixes that we're using, then we'll go in and paint the rest of these skin sections that we've marked out. There you go, Green's got it. Boop. You were, yeah, what are you even doing if you're not booping? All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. So again, 50-50 mix, oiled leather, 50-50 mix, Golden Shadow. Hopefully that makes sense. Yes, write that down. Write it down, Road Knight. All right. Next up, Golden Shadow. So again, hopefully I can put these. Boop, 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 boop. I can just point. So this is straight out of the bottle, Golden Shadow, not mixed with anything else. I'm going to paint a thin line right underneath her eye. Both eyes, not just one, both eyes. The tip of her nose, about halfway up. Halfway up her nose and the tip. A tiny little boop right on her chin here. And right along the middle part of her forehead here. All the way up to the hairline. So far, so good? Now, for those that bought the kit, did I include a clear magenta? I believe I did, but I want to make sure. There we are. At the very least, I can show you the paints that I have on my palette right here. Whoop, scoot over there. These are the colors that we used so far. Perfect. All right. Affirmative. I'm going to grab that. Da, 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 da. I'm going to put some of that on my palette. Now here's the fun part. Now we get to start painting features. So again, in this fun hybrid class that's like skin and kind of eyes and also faces. Welcome. I have some clear magenta on my palette here. And I'm going to take oiled leather and just a touch, like that much, magenta, and I'm going to mix that together. And then I'm going to paint this on her lips. Now I'm going to try to paint the top lip and the bottom lip as separate shapes and leave just a little bit of that dark line that we painted in our base coat, leaving that dark line there. Now, if you accidentally paint over it or your brush control is not as great as you'd like it to be, you can always go back in with our darkest color, Ruddy Leather, and just paint, shoop, a line in between her top and bottom lip. So I'll show you what that looks like too. Shoop. There we are. So you can see that it's starting to be tinted a little bit lighter. Now this is assuming we want to do a lighter lip. You can also mix, for example, Ruddy Leather, our darkest color, with our clear magenta. And that's, yeah. Actually, I think I like that better. Let's do that. So Ruddy Leather, our darkest color, with magenta. Another place to find great inspiration for different skin tones is makeup commercials. Oh my gosh, that's so much fun. I think that when you are, for example, when you're painting with darker skin tones, you can have, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, here, check out this more goth look that I've done here on a very fair skin tone. Now remember, we still have golden skin in our palette. Oh yeah, mix the clear with which color? Road Night, at first, I wanted to mix it with oiled leather, but I actually prefer it with our darker tone, Ruddy Leather. So it's just, again, this is an organic process. Ruddy Leather and just a touch of clear magenta. Now the clears in the Reaper paints, they're translucent but highly pigmented, and they're great for glazing. We won't get into too much glazing in this class because we're going over a lot of different techniques. But right now, I'm going to put some golden skin on our palette, and golden skin we're going to be using for the top highlight. Which is interesting because there's a golden skin highlight, but we don't want to go that, we don't want that much contrast. A shoop, yes, when is shoop proper instead of boop? A shoop more when you're doing a line, and a boop more when you're doing a dot. Yes, that is how I interpret that. Yes, you're welcome, Road Knight. Okay. Now I'm going to mix clear magenta and, ooh, that's too much, golden skin. So it should be a nice light pink. And I'm going to use this for the highlight on the lip. And I'm going to start with the highlight on the right side of the lower lip. I'm also going to, whoops, oh boy, I need a new brush, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Not going to worry about that. There we go. And just a little bit, just a tiny bit. I did a little bit too much. My brush control is not always the best. So I'm going to touch that up. Now, in some other situations, I would use a completely different color, but I really want to keep it in a limited palette. I really like the color Burgundy Wine for darker skin tones. Again, Burgundy Wine is one of the colors that I used for this lip right here. But in case you go a little bit overboard, again, don't be afraid to mix your darkest color, Ruddy Leather, with magenta and paint over it just a little bit. There we go. Now, let's leave that right now and work on our top highlight. So we're going to use Golden Skin as our, oh, thanks, Reaper our hot, what is it, the hotspot highlight? No, hotspot, that's what your dogs get when they have allergies. But yeah, the very, very top highlight. It's gonna read as white, but again. So I'm gonna take, this is a boop moment. This is the ultimate boop moment. So within that highlight on her lip, we're gonna go boop. Now you can have the boop in the middle of the lip, on the side, you know, depending on where your light source is coming from. Right now, because her hair is kind of obscuring part of her face, I'm going to put my boop highlight on the right side. And yeah, no worries, Iffy. Yeah, the last step, I believe, was, let's see, mixing a little bit of that clear magenta with our Golden Skin and just painting a small highlight on her lip. And then just Golden Skin, boop, and we're going to treat that as our pure white highlight. Excellent. Well, yes, feel free to lurk and hang out, absolutely. Yeah, exactly, like an eye reflection, but for the lip. Okay. Are you ready for some more fun? Yes, they are. Twisted says that you guys are taking good care of me. It's true. Now, brown liner. I sing the praises of liners from every rooftop that I climb on. Sing it from the rooftops. I love brown liner. No, really, brown liner's awesome. So is blue liner and the other ones too, but my favorite is brown liner. Sorry, Michael Proctor. His favorite is blue. You're all fun down. No more fun. So I didn't mix mine up very well. There we go. I'm going to put that on my palette here. Again, apologies. Palette cam is not here. So we're making it work. We're making it work, folks. I'm going to block out her entire eye socket. Now this is where we go from the painting skin class to painting eyes. So if you weren't expecting to paint eyes today, welcome, and it's better than you know, making you worry about it. Yes, I love the liners. So I'm going to block out her entire eye socket in brown liner. Now I do have to turn her upside down to get to her other eye socket, mostly because it's obscured a little bit by her hair, but also because the weird way that I paint, again, I hold my brush in a really, really weird way. I totally understand. It just works. It works better. Now I think it's important to do eyes at this step because if we need to clean up around the eye, we can do that with the paints that we have on our palette right now. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Zambies. And welcome. Hey, Paul. Now we're going to let that dry. Now let's say that you might have gone over a little bit in the brown liner. Don't worry, we'll clean that up later. If you need another coat, go ahead and go for it. But don't freak out if it's not a perfect almond shape the first time. Now remember, we have our golden shadow that we painted just underneath the eye. So here, see, there's a little bit of brown liner that went in a little place. Looks like she's crying brown liner now. So I'm going to go in with that highlight, paint it upside down because that's how I have to do this. And I'm just going to clean that up now that it's dry. This is a really handy technique when you have, pardon me, I'm just going to paint a really, really awkward angle. There we go. It's a very handy technique when you have a miniature that, let's say, doesn't have symmetrical eyes. It might be something in the sculpt, it might have been something in, you know, the actual casting process. But yeah, her mascara's running. Better go catch it. No. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening here. And so you can cheat just a little bit, and you can make an eye look a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller depending on how you outline it. All right, next up, eyebrows. Now, you don't have to paint eyebrows if you don't want. It's a daunting thing, I know, but this particular model has a fantastic eyebrow opportunity. Have I got news for you? No, but if you see, the ridge of her brow is very clear. And so I'm going to take my brown liner and just follow the ridge of her brow. And the best news is because her hair is obscuring the other part, you don't have to paint 2 eyebrows and make them even. Just have to paint 1. I'm not entirely happy with how this left one looks, so I'm going to go back with just a little bit more brown liner. Okay, this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I don't think the skin really shines until you paint the eyes. So that's why I decided to make this more of a hybrid class where we do cover painting eyes. So next up is going to be splintered bone. I love using splintered bone for the sclera. I know that people love linen white, and I do too, but I like splintered bone a little bit more than linen white. Linen white is a fantastic warm off-white, but for most everything else, I love splintered bone. Yes, exactly. Yeah, the thing to keep in mind about the liners, you can use them like regular paint. I often mix them with other colors, but they're a little bit more translucent and fluid, so their coverage is not as strong in general. Yeah, and that is on purpose. Yes. And let's say a lot of times, and while we're waiting for that to dry, go ahead and put some splintered bone on your palette if you haven't already. For example, I'm just going to take brown liner with water, and I'll do this on miniatures where I cannot tell what the detail is. Where I'm like, is that rope? Is it a bead? Is it a jewel? I can't tell. I'll take brown liner and just do a quick wash. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I can see the stitching. I know exactly what I need to do now. Or, oh gosh, I need to figure out exactly what I need to do now. It's a feature, not a bug, yes. Okay, so I'm going to take my splintered bone with just a little bit of water to thin it down. I know a lot of people say, oh, it should be the consistency of milk. And I'm lactose intolerant, so that means nothing to me. What I like to do, I use parchment paper, and I know some people will be horrified because I use only 1 sheet and you can still see the yellow and some of the color is obscured. But I've been painting like this forever, and I'm like, it's working. I'm not going to change it now. But just in case you are just getting into wet palettes, I would recommend maybe putting a couple of different layers of parchment on there so you don't see the yellow coming through. But one thing that I know is when I do mix my paints, when I put just a little bit of water and it starts to pull away and kind of congeal in its little paint pool, that's when I know it's the right consistency. And I'm not sure if that helps you, but it helped me. So I'm going to paint just inside. There we go. Whoop. Just inside the black or brown liner almond shape. See, I accidentally got a little bit of white on the top right. That's okay. We can clean that up in a bit. And same thing for the other side. I'm going to turn her over here. Woo. Painting eyes is difficult. Painting eyes when people are watching is even worse. I think what we were joking with Anne Forrester. I can paint eyes great when people aren't looking. But I figure if you're going to teach, or, you know, even worse, show it to a bunch of people on the internet who are watching and waiting, better have it down. I know, I drink a lot of milk and all I can think is skim, 2% whole, almond milk, I don't know, right? I don't paint with milk. Yeah, skim is what they say. Okay. Again, I'm not as familiar with milk, so again, that doesn't quite help me out. But when I add just enough water to it where the paint starts to kind of pull into a little puddle, that's when I know it's the right consistency. So I need just a little bit more white for good coverage. I'm going to give her a bold eye, and that's why I like outlining in brown liner first. Oof, okay, no shaking. We can do this. This is a very strange way to hold your brush. There we go. Pretty happy with that. And then if you need to, go and touch up the liner. Okay. So now we have a white almond inside of a brown liner almond. Is this so far so good? All right. Now we're not going to go into painting really detailed eyes. This is just so we can get a better idea of what the skin should look like on a completed face. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup. We're not going to go into makeup necessarily or anything like that. But you can find a lot of different inspirations, again, in makeup commercials. Or just go look at pictures of our moms in the 80s. Oh, good times. Okay. My mom had a perm and like, I don't know, she had some wild eye makeup. She was fun. That was like her, I'm trying makeup phase. She didn't really wear a lot of makeup growing up, but the 80s is when she really got into it. So that's always fun to go back and maybe paint some minis like that. Okay, so we have our brown liner, we have our eye. I'm going to paint the pupil. Now, again, don't panic, don't freak out. Yes, the amoeba test. I like that, Xanderina. Thanks, Reaper John. Are you ready? I'm going to paint. Whew. Boop, 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 boop. A small circle that I slowly expand, but I'm going to focus it more on the inside of the eye. So there should be a little bit more white on the outside of the eye than the inside. Not too much, because we don't want her to have, was it strabismus? We don't want her pupils looking centered. We want them to look straight, but we also don't want her to have chameleon eyes. Again, not going into too much detail. Painting eyes could be a 2-hour class on its own, but this way we have a painted face to show. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. This is gonna be a little bit more challenging for me because it's upside down, but I think we've got this. Okay, there we go. She's so pretty. Now, if you did accidentally get a little bit of brown liner outside of the eye, that's okay. You can always go back again with our golden shadow on the bottom and clean that up. Now I'm going to take a little bit of golden shadow, and if you guys haven't been painting all day, I'm going to take a mix of golden shadow and oiled leather. Again, that 50-50 mix, and I'm just going to paint the top of the eyelid. Again, this would be a great place if you wanted to have you know, kind of some purple or a lavender color. That would look really pretty on the skin tone if you wanted to, you know, paint her with makeup. Right, exactly. With bigger hair, yes. I do. I love painting. I love painting eyes. Again, when I get it right, I'm super happy. When I get it wrong, I am not. I'm a grump. We can say that. Okay. Sky blue if you want to go true 80s. Yes. You could do some David Bowie. All right. So now that we have her eyes, again, I'm not going to go into, you know, painting the iris and all that, but I am going to take a little bit of splintered bone and just on this dark pupil have a boop. Now, if you're not comfortable with doing a highlight on the pupil, you don't have to. That's okay. There we are. Okay. And I think that once you paint the eyes, the skin tone really does pop more. That's just in my opinion. Now I noticed that her lip, again on my miniature, I painted a little bit too high for her. There we go. For her upper lip. So I'm going to go back and grab a little bit of our mid-tone here and just touch that up. Same thing on the chin. So now's the refining phase. I also like to give just a little bit of a highlight on the corners of the mouth. And if you do that, especially if your highlight is angled, it really does highlight the bow of the lip. And you can have a nice clean edge. Again, I hope I haven't lost too many people. I know we are bouncing around and doing a lot of different techniques. And we're doing one skin tone based on what I teach in the multicultural skin tones class. Woo, say that 5 times fast. But we also get to paint a face. And I think having a class where you can walk away with a completely painted face is, it's all right in my book. Oh, thanks, Izzy. It's a very strange way of holding my brush, I know. Oh, good. I'm glad you think so. Now, to make it stand out even more, and after this we'll get to painting the rest of her skin, I'm going to take brown liner and I'm going to very carefully, because this is one of those steps that can totally mess things up, I'm going to paint right around her face. Again, she's got these great earrings, speaking of 80s, great earrings that are right next to her face, and she has these beautiful braids in her hair. I'm going to take brown liner and just block out the sections of her hair around the face, and that will also help to frame the skin tone that we just painted and have some beautiful contrast around it. And so yeah, like like you said, have the skin tone jump off the mini. Sounds terrifying, but you know what I mean. We want the face to be expressive, our skin tones to be interesting, and our eyes to be looking wherever you decided to paint them, whatever direction you decided. Again, if you have a darker purple or a burgundy wine or a violet red, that would be beautiful for her lip. We're staying fairly neutral with the clear magenta, that if you bought it for the kit for this class, you will use it for a lot of different things. Trust me. Even though we used it just for a little bit on the face, it's going to come in handy. You can even do glazing and skin tones. I know in some of the lighter skin tones, I've used it for, let's see, like on this arm right here. I've added just a little bit of that clear magenta to, I believe it was Stark Naked, which is a Reaper, a great Reaper paint color. And I used that, mixed up a whole bunch of it, and then also added it to my shadow as well. Okay. So here we go. Let's move on to the rest of the skin here. What do you guys think? It's been an hour into the class and you've painted a whole face. Is that faster than, again, if you're only beginning, is that faster than you've painted a face in the past? I know when I was first starting out, it took me at least 3 hours to paint a face. And I'd go back and forth, and the eyes would look like they were bugging out of their eye sockets because I would just put layer after layer after layer. And so it wasn't a good look. But I learned so much, and I took some great classes. Again, I think my first ReaperCon back in 2014, I took more classes than they'll allow you to take, because for the crazy people that signed up for that many classes, they found out that you know, most were burning out. They're like, we don't recommend doing that. You can if you want, but we don't recommend it. But now it's, I think, is it 6? You can take 6 or 8 classes. I can't remember. I took like something crazy like 12. I was just in classes from like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day and taking notes, and I loved it. Anyway, calm down. Got too excited there. Oh, yes, right. Absolutely. In fact, let me go ahead and double check something real quick. Hang tight. So if you guys, here we go. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to adjust our camera here. Come on now. And I'm going to lighten it just a little bit. Now I darkened it because, again, with the bones, the unpainted bones, it can be a little bright. Oh, wonderful! Yes, 2 a day. That would, yep. You can still overload. Okay, I think, what was it? If you buy 2 tickets, you could take twice as many classes. Again, I don't recommend it unless you're highly caffeinated and crazy like me. But yeah, I learned so much. Ooh, too much. I learned so much my first ReaperCon. I absolutely loved it. It's been the convention that I make sure not to miss every single year. So even though it's online, we're here and we're having fun, hopefully learning stuff in this class. But yeah, I love taking tons of classes too. Oh, wonderful! And Jamie took my eye class at ReaperCon last year, and it's helped tremendously. Excellent! Well, good. I hope this hybrid class helps. Again, we have the face. I've blocked this out in brown liner. And now we're going to paint the rest of the skin. I'm super excited. All right. Again, if you're just tuning in, welcome to this class. It's it's paint with all the colors of the skin. I couldn't resist. Can you paint with all the colors of the skin? Well, we're painting one skin tone, but we're talking about a lot of different ones. I know the Reaper Triads are fantastic. I started with a golden skin triad. I love the olive skin triad. That probably is one of my favorites. And I like adding a little bit of, oh gosh, a little extra. So let's say that you have a triad that only goes up to a certain color, add another highlight or add another shade if you want even more, what am I trying to say? Even more contrast. Okay, there we go. Now, boop. Excellent. Just wanted to check chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. But hopefully everybody's having a fantastic time here at the con. I know I am. And again, thanks to the Reaper crew for making it happen online. I'm sure that was not easy to do. All right, here we go. So we have, Ephemeral Dial asks, do you have any advice for prepping skin to be used as a paint? I find it very hard to get the right consistency and coverage from skin. Yes. So prepping to be used, let's see. So are you using, how many coats are you putting on? So I have some follow-up questions. It's a very simple answer, simple question, but a complicated answer. So for skin, a lot of times if I'm not getting good coverage, I'll mix it just a little bit thicker. Again, when I started out painting, I basically called it painting with dirty water, where I would mix it so thin once I found out that like, oh, the reason my miniature is chunky is because I'm not thinning my paint. So I'd thin my paint so much that I would paint like 5 different layers and you could barely tell that anything had changed. It's like painting with dirty water, featuring Mocha Minis. Now, but so I mix my paint a little bit thicker now. I feel more comfortable with how quickly I'm able to blend it before it starts to dry. But for coverage, again, if you're finding that you're not getting the best coverage, again, my initial reaction would say mix it a little bit thicker. So right now, again, we have, this is our first layer. You'll see it's a little bit blotchy. And then with 2 layers, you'll see that it's a lot smoother. So I usually do at least 2 or 3 layers of a base coat, depending on whether I'm painting directly on bones or on a primed miniature. And I hope that helps. It seems a little silly to say. It's a very dangerous thing to say. Add less water to your paint. But I find that helps with coverage as well. The only thing that you need to be worried about is, you know, the chunkiness of the paint if it goes on a little bit too thick and if you don't wait for it to dry in between each layer. Oh! Yes, okay, I see what you were saying, Ephemeral Dial. Yes. Wonderful. Okay. You know, that's okay, Twisted. I do not have a PDF for this, but I would be happy to, you know, make one and I guess type one up and be happy to put that in the Mocha chat on the Discord. And so I can go over exactly what colors that we painted with and kind of a basic explanation of the step-by-step process and kind of a 50-50 mix of this. You know, these are the colors that we used for the eyes, etc. I hope that helps. Ah, Jamie asks a great question. Do you line after base coats or after you were finished with a section? It depends. I think that if, I think it's a section. So for example, we painted this leg right here, but you'll notice that I didn't go in and do the lining. I used to line after every single layer because I was so precise. Like when I first started painting, if I saw this, I would be like, oh, I'm a terrible painter. I've got to start over. Just put it in the simple green and strip it. Again, I'm a high-strung person, but I try very hard to not let anyone else make those mistakes, especially if you're just starting out. So let's say that I paint this section and I'm done with the highlights. Now, I feel comfortable enough in my brush control that I'm not worried that the liner is going to get into my highlights. That's the worst, where you paint a section, you've got all of your perfect blends, and then you go to line it and the liner just runs right into all those perfect blends. So it's really up to you what you want to do. Because I've been painting for a while now, I do line at the end, but you can absolutely clean as you go. That way you don't have to worry about messing up everything at the very end. All right. Yes. All right. So if you are using a well palette, again, this is why we did the face first, and now we're going to paint the rest of the skin. If you did, go ahead and mix all your paints. Put that, I guess, well, here, I'm going to change out my wet palette here. Because even on wet palettes, you don't want the paint to sit too long. I find that you get that, especially if you live in a drier climate, you get the paint crust. Yeah, you don't want that. So let's go ahead and mix up a fresh batch for the rest of the skin. And as we do that, again, I'll ask you to put these 3 on your palette: Ruddy Leather, Oiled Leather, and Golden Shadow. And we're going to tackle the rest of the skin now. But I'm also going to answer a couple of questions in between. Yes. And yes, if you find the jumps in contrast are pretty stark, again, I didn't go over blending too much because that can be its own 2-hour class. But if you're just starting out in blending and you're trying to have less of a transition in between your colors. For example, I'll show you just on this leg and then I'll cover it up real quick. Here's what it would look like if we jumped from one color to another without mixing steps in between. So we've got ruddy leather, oiled leather, and golden shadow. And yes, I would use the same process on a smaller mini. And yes, hopefully Brilliant Silver, this will also answer your question. Do I have a good method for picking the colors to use on, is it non-standard skin colors? Oh, so like something like this? Sure. So for example, tomorrow's class, I'm painting Flying Rocky, which they're little baby dragons, they're super cute. And one of the things that I'm using, and I'll show you this real quick, pardon me. Again, if you're just starting out, whoa, man, my hair is out of control. Sorry, guys. Here we go. For example, ocean colors. So if you're starting out in non-traditional skin tones, being, you know, greens and blues and purples, I like to start with one of the Reaper Triads. And for example, this plus Blue Liner. So Blue Liner being your very darkest shade, and then Surf Aqua being the lightest. And if you wanted to mix that with white for an even brighter highlight, you absolutely could. But if you're trying to get into skin tones and you want those transitions to be nice and you're not really sure which colors to pick, I would absolutely recommend getting one of those triads. And then once you are more familiar with those colors, you can start testing out skin tones and jumping to, you know, a light lavender to kind of a darker teal. You can start mixing and matching. So you can tell, let's see, for example, on this cloth, it is a lavender color, but it's highlighted with a light blue. And I don't know, I really like it. I think it's fun. I don't want to get too off topic there, but that's kind of my recommendation, especially if you're just starting out and trying different skin tones. Does that help? Yes, an Unfriendly Ghost. It happens at ReaperCon, my multicultural skin tone class. Of course, we couldn't have that in person this year. And the reason why we're focusing on one skin tone is because there's a lot of different paints we use in that class. We go over more Asian skin tones. I think we do, you know, darker skin tones. We do how did I describe it? A decidedly Caucasian. And one young lady in the class raised her hand. She said, "Oh, you mean like me?" Porcelain white? I said, no, but you can still have really cool undertones and have some more contrast. So I get really, really excited. Again, trying to stay focused and professional, but I get really excited about painting different skin tones and blending, and I could talk all day about it, but I want to make sure that we stay on track. And yes, absolutely, Sarducci, yep. And glaze over it with a clear. I highly recommend playing with the clears and skin tones, especially with the magenta, clear magenta. Oh, and yes, thank you, Road Knight. Okay, so let's see, where were we? And yes, I do like a cooler off-white. Absolutely, Goose. All right, and let's see. I think I'm caught up with all those questions. We'll jump back in. So right now, again, this is our 50-50 mix. The base coat is a 50-50 mix of this color. Now I'm going to test something out real quick. Hold on. Don't do what I'm doing. Okay, yeah, we're good. I'm going to show you what this looks like if we just use the paint directly out of the bottle. So here's ruddy leather. It's just a little bit darker than our skin tone. Here is oiled leather. I'm going to paint that on here. If I were a thumb painter, this would be a lot easier to show. And then here's golden shadow. Now we're using golden skin as our top highlight, but you can tell that the transition between these colors it's pretty stark. When you think ruddy leather next to golden shadow, I might have said golden skin, I do apologize. I meant golden shadow. If you tried to take this dark color and blend it into golden shadow, you might end up with kind of a chalky situation. I don't know if you've painted skin and tried to go from a really dark color to a really light one, and even you might be the best blender in the world, but it still might turn out a little bit funky. And that's why I've added oiled leather in between. Wonderful, the class is giving you the right tools to change that? Awesome. I'm glad to hear that, Izzy. Yeah, and again, I think that a lot of folks, and I'll speak from people that have taken my class in the past, they'll say, I haven't felt comfortable painting different skin tones because I don't want to get it wrong. And there's so many different ways to get it wrong. But again, I think if you go on Pinterest, I think they have a lot of really great, art not only, but also that's kind of where I found was the Humane, I believe, from Angelica Das. And again, I hope I'm saying her name right. But she's a photographer and an artist, and that's where we saw, again, if you're just tuning in, this right here. And it's a really, I want to say it was National Geographic, and they called it the race issue. Or gosh, it might have been Times. There were two great articles, but they talked about how you can take, like, for example, Asian. Full transparency, my dad is blonde hair, blue eyes, and my mom is Filipino. So people a lot of times are like, so what's your background? So that's why, again, if you have folks that might be biracial, then you can have even more interesting, undertones. And for example, my sister is quite a bit lighter than I am, but I have my dad's like skeletal structure. Like I have his nose, but my mom's, skin tone. Whoa, as I punch my lamp. But the interesting part is when you get it right and you have kind of these warmer mid-tones like this oiled leather, I think that really helps make the skin tone look rich. And you can have, for example, one continent or one quote-unquote race of people, but a lot of those skin tones can vary. And so, yeah, you might have, excuse me, 5 different people of the same race, but they're completely different skin tones, different undertones. We could go on and on. I get super excited about that. But staying in the vein of what we're talking about today is making sure that we're blending and using the right colors. So let's go ahead and tackle, well, I'll leave the leg. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. Paint over that. Let that sit. Now, I'm glad you think so. Yeah, and I'll be happy to share that in the ReaperCon Discord in the Mocha chat. If you guys want to look that up. Now that I think it was Time. It was Time magazine. But National Geographic also did a really interesting, not article, but the theme of their publication. All right. Yes, getting back to it. Thank you guys for your patience. So we have, again, our 50-50 mix of ready leather and oiled leather. Right now we're going to focus on the chest. And we're going to cheat light a little bit. We're going to go for a more stylized approach. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to block out the sections just like we did for the face. So remember we highlighted on the nose, the forehead, the cheekbones, and right on the chin. We're going to do the same thing with her chest. However, it's going to be just a little bit different. So I'm going to take oiled leather. Again, this is just straight up oiled leather, and you're going to see a harsh transition, but we're going to feather that transition in just a second. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to paint here. And I'm going to make sure that's kind of a curved arc. And I'm also going to paint a triangle right here. This made a huge difference for me when I started painting. I could not figure out why my miniatures chests did not look cool. And it's because of this triangle right here, in my opinion. It just gives more contrast and helps cheat light in a way that it makes everything look like it has more volume. Anything from like your deltoid muscles on your shoulder to, again, your forehead, anything can have just a little bit more contrast if you know where to place those highlights. Now again, I like to go from a darker skin tone, the darkest shade of what we're painting, to the lightest. So that's why everything else looks a little bit dark, and then of course the face is much brighter. So let's go ahead and do that. Taking our oiled leather, and just creating bloop, bloop, 2 arcs and a triangle. Now remember how we made that 2/3 mix? 2/3 oiled leather, 1/3 ruddy leather. We're going to use that same approach. Once you have this, that harsh transition right there, I'm going to paint that 2/3 mix right along that transition. Again, this is not how to blend perfectly. This is how to blend enough to get as much as you can out of this class. It's a long title, but yes. And that should soften the transition. So again, you can wet blend, you can layer. For me, I like mixing incremental steps in between each color and then carefully applying those. And if you need to feather it out, rinse your brush, dry it off on your towel, and then boop, 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 boop. Just kind of how did they, somebody said it once, is like you put a layer of paint down and you just on top, on the upper surface, you tickle the surface of the paint. And I don't know, it made me giggle so much. I thought it was so cute, but I totally took that to heart, and I started painting a little bit differently after I heard that. But yeah, I don't know if that helps you, but it helped me. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. And you could varl, yeah, again, with musculature, absolutely. So while we wait for that to dry, if it hasn't dried for you yet, we're going to do the same thing on the front of this leg. So it's the leg that's bent more than the other. It's going to be her right, our left. I'm going to identify a plane of light. And it's going to look like this. And it's going to go all the way down to her kneecap. And this is just straight up oiled leather. Not worrying about the transitions. You can blend that later, don't worry. And I'm going to let that dry. Now, while I wait for that to dry, I'm also going to paint the back of her calf with oiled leather. Boop, boop. Again, she has orange undertones. There's plenty of ways. You could start with a base of ruddy leather and have blue undertones. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. And this helped me because when I first started, I could not for the life of me figure out where shadows and where highlights were supposed to go. Even with Zenithal priming, I really struggled with it. And once I got over the fact that I don't have to have everything blended perfectly when I put paint on the model, and I can play around with thin layers of paint, even though the transitions aren't perfect, it freed me up to think, oh, okay, now I can imagine this in blocks and chunks of light. All right. Now, again, remember that 2/3. So if your transitions aren't perfect, just mix another step in between. Now I'm running out of oiled leather on my palette, so I'm going to put a little bit more on here. All right. I'm going to need a little bit more oiled leather because it's just not opaque enough. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing, but with a second coat. Again, apologies for the way that I hold my brush. It's kind of funky. Most of the time it doesn't get in the way of my webcam, but sometimes it absolutely does. Here we are. And again, don't put that second base coat on there until your first one is dry. I've made that mistake many, many times. Okay? Now again, we're going to take that 2/3 oiled leather, 1/3 ruddy leather. Now, once your sections are dry, again, don't worry about it. We're going to paint a transition right along the edge. Now what I like to do is I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it off, and then, remember, boop, 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 tickle the paint. This is also called feathering, but I like tickling the paint. That's it's just way cuter. Okay. All right, so that softens the transition. Again, it's not a perfect blend, but for what we're doing today, it's good enough. You can tell the difference because right here you can see that stark burp line, and then here, once this dries, it's going to be a little bit softer. Okay, so I'm gonna boop, 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 boop. Get that transition with that 2/3, 1/3 mix. And then go back in and boop, boop, boop. Tickle the transition of paint. It sounds silly, but I don't know. If you're painting with your kids and you tell them to do that, I think that would be super cute. Here we are. All right. So see how softer that transition is? Okay, so let me make sure I'm up to date here. Oh yes, absolutely, Coops. Coops says, Mocha, I think I recall you saying in one of your regular streams that you used to drive your teachers nuts with how you held your pencil while writing. Yes, and I went to Catholic school, but it was after they stopped smacking you with rulers. So, dodge that bullet. I would get in trouble for it, but I got in trouble for a lot of things. It was so silly. I used to get detentions because I would come in from recess and my shirt would be untucked. Detention! And I'd have to clean windows. Or my shoes would be untied because I thought it was cool and I went with one shoe untied. I don't know, I was in middle school. Detention! But one thing they did not break me of was this silly grip. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Izzy. All right. So now that we have that, let's go back to, again, up here. Let's do a 50-50 mix of, are you ready? Oiled leather and golden shadow. Again, this is the same process that we used on the face. However, we're covering a lot larger of an area. And so I wanted to make sure that if you're not using a wet palette, you still had fresh paint to work with. So just like we did, boop, boop, boop. Just like we did on the face, we're going to go smaller highlights. And I'm going all the way up to the edge of where that fabric is. There we go. And then using a little bit of oiled leather just to transition that and feather. Again, don't be frustrated if you find that your blends don't look that great. What we're talking about and learning today is where to place those highlights and shadows and how to get as much contrast out of your miniature as you want. All right, we're going to use that same 50-50 mix of oiled leather and golden shadow right here, but we're going to paint an even smaller triangle towards the center of her cleavage. Okay. And then again, we can blend that right out. Now if you want, you can bring the blend all the way up a little bit. Boop, boop, boop. Sorry, I'm going to turn that down there. What's happening? Ah, what's happening? There. Turn off all notifications for Discord. Sorry about that. As long as I can still hear John or Justin, so I don't go way over my time slot. Oh, detention was fun though. I don't know. It made me feel cool. Anyway, that is joking aside. I usually use it just to read and be by myself because kids are mean. All right. So how are you feeling about the chest region so far? Again, if you look at her from straight on, not only does she have a really bright face with lots of contrast. But we also, you know, if you look at her from straight ahead and also just a little bit above, you have enough contrast on her décolletage as well. Yes, right? Are there any other introverts that love detention? I think, yeah. Other people wouldn't bother me, and once I was done cleaning all the windows, I got to work on my homework. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Michelle. I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are too. So that same color that we just used on the chest, again, the 50-50 mix, we're going to paint inside on this leg. Remember, see that transition right there? That's okay. You will learn how to blend that out in the many other wonderful blending classes that you can take at Reaper, ReaperCon Online. But if you look on the blue version of this lovely lady, you'll see that I kept the highlight towards the fabric. And I like the idea of having that nice thick liner and having the highlight meet with a dark section. I think it just really makes it pop more. Yeah, French-ish. best French that I can muster, right? Okie dokie. And then here on her thigh, same thing. I've become such a messy painter since I started streaming on Twitch. Like it's a little embarrassing. So if your wet palette looks a lot nicer than mine, kudos to you. There we are. So I'm just gonna do a quick little blend there. So what do you think? Underneath her knee is going to be the darker part because it's not going to be getting as much light. However, when you turn her around, if you think about the top of her calf, we're also going to have, I'm going to paint it kind of as a little oval, like that. Again, it's subtle because it's a 50-50 mix of oiled leather and golden shadow, but I'm going to paint within our first highlight. So the second highlight is going within our first highlight. You can feather or blend as you see fit, but that's going to give it just a nice golden highlight right there. I'm not really happy with how this looks, so I'm going to touch this up just a bit. There we go. Feather that transition. There we are. Okay. Well, that is a basic how to paint a medium dark skin tone. Again, there's I love this word, myriad of other skin tones that you can try. Hopefully this gave you a nice starting point if you haven't painted, you know, different skin tones before. The same principles also apply to skin tones like blue, green, purple. Purple and blue are a lot of fun to paint. Greens are great, orcs are great, but I love blues and purples. Yes. So, whoa. And then throw your mini on the ground. No, sorry about that. But yes, in this, I'm pretty happy with how she turned out. And again, this is an example of one that I painted. And I wanted to stay a little bit darker. Again, you can go up all the way to a lighter color. I've seen some, again, I like the more cartoony approach, but there are some more photorealistic painters that go all the way up to white. Now, I have to worry about making sure that her skin doesn't look greasy. In my opinion, and I'm going to take just this golden shadow right here, just line the bottom of the eye to give it a little bit more boop, 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 contrast. But that's my personal opinion. I think it looks a little bit greasy, and I've seen my face when you know, I'm out in the sun and I've got a nice tan, and then all of a sudden you know, but it's just white. It's white here because it's oil. So that's why I like to paint skin tones, but stop around right here. So it's just dark enough and you have enough transition that it still is warm and has that golden hue. I like it a lot. So let me review one more time the colors that we used today. We've got brown liner, splintered bone. We use this mostly for the eyes. And then the skin tone, ruddy leather, oiled leather, and golden shadow. Now we did add a little bit of golden skin. I think having if you don't have it already, the golden triad, again, golden shadow, golden skin, golden highlight, but I didn't want to go all the way up to the highlight. Depending on how brave you feel, you could take golden skin and do spot highlights. So, excuse me, for example, right underneath her eyeliner. Whoop.
Ms. Mocha?
Yes, uh-huh.
I just want to let you know that you're approaching your 15-minute mark here.
Perfect. All right, thank you, Justin. For added contrast. So I put just a little bit on the tip of her nose and then right underneath her eyes to make her eyes pop. And I'm going to do boop, boop, a tiny, tiny, well, I think that was too much, but just a little bit on her, put a little bit on her chin, but then I went in and added just a little bit more golden shadow to smooth that out. So there she is. If you want a warm, golden, medium to dark skin tone, I think we did a good job of that today. Again, we used a little bit of the clear magenta for the lips, and we mixed that with our skin tone. So we didn't just use clear magenta on the lips. Now, if you're, again, feeling brave, I'm adding a couple of things that we could do at the end here. If you want to make a glaze of clear magenta, again, there's a 2-hour class of glazing and washes. You can take it, ReaperCon. They're fantastic. I highly recommend them. But one thing I'll do just for fun is, let's say I've got a glaze and I'm going to tap it on my paper towel so I don't have too much. I'll add just a little bit on the inside of the cheekbones, kind of in the hollows of the cheeks. Thank you. And that gives the impression that, oh, but I need to make sure the transition is nice and clean and there isn't just a line of, there's not a burp where you can see where it stops. We like our sound effects here. And that gives just a little bit of kind of a blush. So if you aren't really comfortable with painting a lot of makeup on your miniature, or you're just starting to paint more expressive faces, glazing, again, adding a lot of water to one of the Reaper Clears is a fantastic way to glaze just a little bit of color into the cheeks. And I just want to leave some time for questions, more questions at the end. I hope that everybody has enjoyed this and learned something. Again, I think that I will be posting not only a list of all the colors that we used today in the Mocha chat in Discord. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to see pictures of what you guys have done in this class. Again, happy to answer any questions there as well. I do. I love my sound effects, DJ Beard. Okay. Let's see. I want to make sure. Oh, crossbow. Sure, sure. Yeah, I believe that I have them written down. Crossbow's asking if I can post the colors that I used on this Frost Giant Queen. I painted her quite a while ago, but I have a painting journal that, if I'm good about this, I write down every single paint color that I use. That's ideal. Okay, let's see. Oh, thanks, JJ Beard. That's very kind of you. Yeah, wonderful. And again, if you guys are around tomorrow and free, we have our 11 to 2 CST. We're going to be painting Flying Rocky. And he's a picture of him also in the Mocha chat in Discord. We're going to be painting him start to finish as a paint-along, again, live, asking questions. But it's going to be a 3-hour class. But we're going to paint all of him start to finish. So again, if you're in that class, go ahead and assemble him and scrub him with dish soap and a toothbrush. Good, I'm glad to hear that, Mel. Awesome. again, if you guys want to, again, ask questions in Discord, feel free to tell Reaper that I wasn't a total hack. No, they would know. They're watching this right now. But yeah, always appreciate feedback. This is the first time I've done a blended class like this. Usually it's just painting eyes, it's just painting skin tones, but knowing that we had, I wanted to make sure the kit was as few paints as I could list, but also do the most stuff within 2 hours. Hopefully that worked out for the online format. Again, it's not the same as my Painting Multicultural Skin Tones class, but it is a little bit of that, plus a little bit of the Painting Eyes class. Yes. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. It is going to be a Zoom class, Averlina. Yeah, I was again very flattered that Reaper asked me to do this on their Twitch channel. So shout out to the Reaper crew. They're working really hard, and we really appreciate the the thought and the support. Yes, good. Well, I'm glad you're excited. Any other questions? Let me know here in chat. And I hope to be able to meet so many of you in person in the future at a future ReaperCon. I love it so much. We do hopefully Derek Schubert and I can still do the karaoke, and we love to sing "Paint with all the colors of the skin." Yeah. What are the words? You can own the paint and still all you'll own is paint until you can paint with all the colors of the skin. Jazz hands. Anyway, we're silly, we're fun. Again, for those that were coming in that have followed me on Twitch, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you to all the people that are tuning in. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun at the very least. And I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of your ReaperCon. Yeah. And again, you can find me at the social media things that you see at the bottom of the screen, at Mocha_Minis on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. And I used to help with the Reaper Paint and Takes at some of the local conventions, but now that I'm no longer in Texas and in Wisconsin, I just make it a point to get to ReaperCon each year to paint and to have fun as well. But yeah, thank you so much, folks. Again, I'll see you on the Discord, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for whoever's next. And Justin, John, if you're listening there on Discord, is that a good time to good transition time? They've run away. No, I don't. I just want to make sure I'm giving enough time, but also not ending too early. So again, cheers. We have a coffee themed stream. As always, I paint better when I drink coffee. The next best thing to hanging out in person. Yeah. But make sure you're supporting, again, the other artists and Artist Alley and asking them questions. There's a bunch of fantastic people at ReaperCon, and we really appreciate them taking the time, supporting not only the painters, the sculptors, just all the folks. Yes. I know I need to go to more conventions in Wisconsin. All right. Yes, Justin?
I was just adding to it. I said thank you, Mocha.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're most welcome. Well, if you're good with that, I'll put the thanks for watching, and you guys can take it from here. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thanks
all right.
for doing all this.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, awesome. All right, well, I will see you guys on Discord. Again, thank you so much for watching. Again, you can find me at the links there, but always make sure to support the great folks at Reaper. Much love to them, and thank you to them for making all this happen. So, all right. And yes, take care of yourself, be great, and do something nice for yourself. It's a crazy time, and make sure that you're painting, having fun, and doing all the fun hobby stuff that re-energizes you for all the positive, happy painting vibes. All right, you guys, if you're part of my class tomorrow, I'll see you at 11 a.m. CST for the Painting Flying Rocky. Otherwise, I hope to see you around Twitch and next year at ReaperCon. All right, take care, everybody. Have a good one.